Simone Jackson grew up in a quiet neighborhood in Atlanta. As a child, she watched her mother work long hours as a nurse, and her father juggled two jobs to keep the family afloat. Money was always tight, but Simone's parents never let her feel weak or defeated. They taught her that hard work and belief in oneself could overcome any obstacle. Even as a little girl, Simone dreamed of doing something big, something that would show the world who she was and what she could achieve. In high school, Simone fell in love with computers. She spent hours after class teaching herself to code, using an old second-hand laptop her uncle gave her. She read every free resource she could find online, even though the connection was slow and sometimes cut out. She practiced writing programs and building small websites for friends. When she fixed a bug or saw a page load smoothly after she worked late into the night, she felt a rush of pride. It was the first time she realized she could create something valuable from her own skill and effort. After graduation, Simone enrolled at Georgia Tech. The classes were challenging, and she often felt out of place. In a lecture hall full of white men, she stood out as one of the few black women studying computer science. Some classmates assumed she was there only because of diversity quotas. A few even whispered behind her back that she did not belong. Those moments hurt, but Simone refused to let them stop her. She studied harder, asked more questions, and stayed late in the lab until she mastered every topic. When she earned top grades, even the skeptics could not deny her talent. In her junior year, Simone joined a student startup competition. She teamed up with two classmates to build a simple mobile app that allowed small businesses to accept payments easily online. They called it Pay His. It worked well enough, but when they presented it to investors, the feedback was blunt. Great idea, but you need more security, better design, and a stronger team. Simone took those words not as criticism, but as fuel to improve. She spent her weekends rewriting code, learning encryption techniques, and redesigning the user interface. She taught herself the basics of finance and bank regulations so she could speak confidently in meetings. At the final round, Simone stood before a panel of investors. She spoke clearly about PES, explained how the technology worked, and showed how it could help small shops compete in a market dominated by big corporations. When she finished, the judges asked questions that would have intimidated many people. But Simone answered each one with calm confidence and honesty. A week later, the competition organizers announced PEs as the winner, alongside a cash prize. Simone and her team got their first real investor, a small venture fund willing to back their idea with $50,000. For Simone, that moment was the first step toward something much larger. After college, Simone moved into a small one-bedroom apartment. She had no fancy office, just a cluttered desk, a sofa that sagged in the middle, and a second-hand computer she refurbished herself. She sent emails to potential clients, pitched her service as a fresh option for local merchants, and met shop owners in coffee shops to show how PEs worked. Some clients were skeptical. They had heard of countless startups that promised the moon and then disappeared. Simone never took the rejections personally. She listened to their doubts, fixed the issues they pointed out, and returned with a stronger pitch. Slowly, a few merchants signed on. When one popular bakery agreed to use PEs, they told their friends and neighbors. Word spread, and more businesses joined. As PEs grew, Simone faced a new challenge. Banks were wary of a small startup. Handling large sums of money, they worried about security and compliance with financial regulations. Simone spent sleepless nights studying regulatory documents, working with lawyers, and adding extra layers of protection to her system. She formed a partnership with a small regional bank, offering them a share of her fees in exchange for their support and oversight. It was a modest deal, but it gave her company legitimacy. Soon, PAs processed millions in transactions each month. With that progress behind her, Simone wanted to aim higher. She envisioned expansion beyond domestic borders into international markets where many small businesses still used cash only. To do that, she needed a major banking partner, one of the big national banks with a global presence. For months, Simone traveled to conferences, sat through long meetings, and faced rooms full of executives who rarely looked past her resume.
Ow.
They often assumed she was inexperienced. They asked tough questions about risk, profit margins, and technical infrastructure. Each time, Simone answered directly. She admitted what she did not know, then explained how she would learn or where she would find expert help. She showed them data from her existing clients, proving that her system worked securely and reliably. One spring morning, Simone received an email that would change everything. It was from First National Bank, one of the largest banks in the country. They invited her to their headquarters in downtown Atlanta to discuss a new strategic partnership. Simone felt a thrill she had never known. She called her mother first, her voice trembling with excitement. "Mom, they want to meet me," she said. "They want to trust our platform with their clients' money." Her mother, who had always supported her quietly, cried on the phone and reminded Simone how proud she was. On the day of the meeting, Simone dressed in a crisp navy suit. She arrived early, taking a moment to stand outside the building's grand columns and glass doors. She felt her heart pound, but she closed her eyes, drew in a deep breath, and reminded herself she belonged there. Inside, she was greeted by a team of bank executives, each with a polite smile. They led her to a large boardroom with a long mahogany table. Simone's legal counsel sat beside her, while the bank's lawyers and compliance officers took seats across from her. The meeting began with small talk, a discussion of whether family and shared interests. Then the bank's chief strategy officer stood, thanked Simone for coming, and laid out their vision. They wanted to transform how small businesses managed money worldwide, creating a digital bridge between local shops and global customers. They explained that they planned to deposit $3 billion into a new fund dedicated to this partnership. It was a staggering amount. Simone nearly lost her breath when she heard the figure. Her mind raced. $3 billion. 3,000 million in numbers she had only seen in textbooks. She gripped her pen tightly and fought to keep her expression calm. Paperwork was passed around. Simone watched as the bank's representatives filled in details: account numbers, compliance checks, risk assessments. When it was her turn, she signed her name next to the clause confirming the deposit. She adjusted her glasses, tapped her pen lightly on the table, and felt a swell of pride. Here she was, a black woman CEO from a small apartment, signing documents for a multi-billion-dollar commitment. She could feel history being made. After the papers were signed, the bank's operations team initiated the wire transfer. Simone's heart pounded as the final approval went through. Within hours, $3 billion would sit in the dedicated account, ready to be deployed in support of entrepreneurs around the world. As the bank's executives left the room, Simone stood by the window, looking out at the city skyline. She thought of her parents back home, of the long nights spent coding, of every dismissal and doubt that had fueled her determination. In that moment, she felt invincible. She knew her journey was only beginning. Simone woke before dawn on the morning of her meeting at First National Bank. Sunlight had not yet touched the sky when she slipped into her navy suit. She smoothed the fabric with gentle hands, reminding herself that every stitch and seam carried the weight of her hard work. In the bathroom mirror, she practiced her calm smile. Her reflection looked like a CEO, not the young girl who taught herself to code in a cramped apartment. She packed her laptop, her notebook, and a small photograph of her parents tucked in her briefcase. Their faces gave her courage. By sunrise, Simone was on the road. The city felt quiet as she drove through empty streets, the hum of her car engine the only sound. She thought of the first time she had visited a bank office years ago, hoping for a small loan. Back then, she had stood in line like everyone else. On that day, the teller had asked her why a little company needed more money. Simone had stuttered and wished she could disappear. Now, she was headed to a boardroom where she would sign documents worth billions of dollars. Let out a soft laugh at the memory, feeling a thrill run through her. First National's building rose tall against the sky, a wall of glass and steel. Simone parked in the visitor lot and took a steadying breath before stepping onto the sidewalk. A doorman held the door open and greeted her with a nod. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. Simone's heels clicked across the marble floor as she approached the security desk. She passed through a metal detector and allowed her bag to be scanned. The security officer gave her a polite smile, but his eyes flicked to her badge, then back to her face. Simone held her head. "Hi." An assistant guided Simone down a long corridor with framed photographs of the bank's history lining the walls. She saw images of old bank buildings, black and white photos of serious-looking bankers, and pictures of grand ribbon-cutting ceremonies. At the end of the hall, a pair of heavy glass doors opened onto a wide reception area. Plush chairs and muted colors sat around low tables. A fountain bubbled quietly in the corner. Simone felt a sudden flutter in her chest, part excitement, part nerves. Moments later, a bank representative appeared and introduced himself as Mr. Patel. He shook Simone's hand firmly and smiled. "Welcome, Ms. Jackson. We are honored to have you here." He led her through another door into a sleek elevator. The doors closed, and the car rose smoothly to the top floor. The view through the elevator's small window showed the city spreading out in every direction, towers of offices, parks that gleamed green in the early light, and roads that looked like veins through the heart of Atlanta. Simone's heartbeat steadied as the elevator came to a stop. The boardroom doors swung open, and Simone stepped inside with her legal counsel right behind her. The table was polished to a mirror shine. Round it sat 6 bank executives, each dressed in tailored suits and crisp shirts. Their faces held welcome and curiosity. At the head of the table was Mr. Caldwell, the chief strategy officer. Stood and offered his hand. "Ms. Jackson, thank you for joining us. Please have a seat." Simone slid into the chair set aside for her and placed her briefcase on the floor. Mr. Caldwell began with small talk. He asked about Simone's journey, about her family, and about her early days building PEs. Simone spoke softly but clearly, telling stories of late nights debugging code and of the first merchant to trust her platform. When she spoke of her parents, her voice wavered with emotion. Mr. Caldwell nodded respectfully and passed the conversation smoothly back to business plans. The room felt warm, not cold or intimidating. Simone felt at ease. Then the mood shifted toward the real purpose of the meeting. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat and said, "Let us discuss the terms of our partnership." He motioned to a presentation on a large screen. Charts and graphs appeared showing projected growth, global reach, and revenue potential. One slide displayed a figure in bold. $3 billion. Simone felt her breath catch. $3 billion carried so many zeros that it looked like a secret code. She counted them silently to ground herself. 3, 6, 9, 9 zeros. She placed her hands flat on the table and leaned forward, focused on the details. The bank's finance director, Ms. Lee, explained how the deposit would work. "We will create a dedicated fund within First National Bank. This fund will hold $3 billion to support PIS's international expansion. We will allocate the money in stages, based on milestones that we agree upon." She spoke with authority, but her tone was reassuring. Simone nodded. She asked a question about the timing of transfers, and Ms. Lee answered patiently. Then Simone asked how quickly she could access the funds once the account was active. The answer was almost immediate. Same-day transfers for approved transactions. Next came the legal details. Simone's counsel and the bank's lawyers exchanged views on regulatory clauses, risk assessments, and compliance measures. Pages of documents sat on the table, each sheet neatly printed and double-spaced. Simone watched as her counsel pointed out minor changes, language that clarified liability, wording that outlined dispute processes. Every change felt like another building block in the foundation of a big, new structure. The lawyers nodded and made notes. Simone felt proud that she had surrounded herself with experts who spoke this language so fluently. Finally, the moment arrived to sign. Mr. Caldwell handed Simone a pen and 2 copies of the agreement. The pen felt heavy and solid in her hand. She read the final paragraph one last time. First National Bank agrees to deposit $3 billion into the partnership fund within 2 business days of agreement execution. No tricks. No hidden clauses. She exhaled slowly and signed her name on the dotted line. Then she passed the pen to Mr. Caldwell, who signed on behalf of the bank. They both placed ink-stained fingers together in a brief symbolic gesture of partnership. After the signing, Ms. Lee asked if Simone would like to witness the initiation of the wire transfer. Simone nodded. They walked to a smaller room, where 3 bank operations staff sat at computers. One technician typed rapidly on a keyboard, another watched a detailed transaction log, and a third prepared confirmation documents. Simone stood. Behind them, close enough to see the screen that showed the account number, routing details, and the exact amount. The operator clicked authorize, and a prompt appeared, transfer successful. Simone's heart thundered in her ears. As she read the words, $3 billion had moved into the fund. The operations staff printed the confirmation and handed it to Simone. She held the paper carefully, as if it were a fragile treasure map. "Congratulations," one of the technicians said softly. Simone smiled and thanked them. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, 1 part relief and 2 parts triumph. 2 people from her old lab days in college might not believe it if they heard this story. Back in the boardroom, executives offered congratulations. They brought out a small cake with the bank's logo, and Simone cut the first slice. She laughed as a bit of frosting stuck to the corner of her mouth. The room felt alive. Cell phones briefly raised to capture photos. A few toasts were made. Formal, some offhand. Simone raised her glass of sparkling water and said, "2 new beginnings." Her voice was clear, confident, and full of promise. As the celebration wound down, Simone gathered her things. She shook hands with each executive and thanked them for their trust. Outside the boardroom, she paused for a moment by the window. Below her, the city shone under a bright spring afternoon. Cars moved like tiny toys. People hurried across crosswalks. Simone harnessed that energy and committed it to memory. She knew this day would live forever in her mind. But even as she walked toward the exit, she felt a slight chill. Security. Officer lingered by the door, his gaze fixed on her. His posture was relaxed, but his hand rested near his belt. Simone caught his eye and gave a polite nod, returned it, but his expression was unreadable. In that moment, she realized that every success carried new risks. Her victory had drawn attention. Not all attention was friendly. Simone stepped into the elevator and pressed ground floor. The doors closed, and as she descended, she thought of what lay ahead, rolling out the funds, scaling operations overseas, and proving herself every step of the way. She reminded herself of the code she wrote by candlelight in college, of every long night and early morning. She would need that resolve now more than ever. When the doors opened on the lobby, Simone emerged ready. The world had just made space for her, and she intended to fill it. Simone returned to her small office late that afternoon, her mind buzzing with the excitement of the morning's success. The early sunlight had given way to a soft orange glow, and the city outside her window looked calm and peaceful. She sat at her desk and opened her laptop, eager to review the confirmation email from First National Bank. Instead, she found a terse message. "Your deposit is under review. Please await further notice." Her heart skipped a beat. Under review? She frowned and clicked on the tracking link. It said the $3 billion had been marked as pending reversal. She stared at the words in disbelief. She called Mr. Caldwell, expecting calm explanations and swift solutions. His voicemail. Picked up. She left a message, her voice steady but urgent. "This is Simone Jackson. Please call me back immediately about the deposit." After 5 long minutes, her phone buzzed. It was Ms. Lee, the bank's finance director. Simone felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was just a routine check. "Simone," Ms. Lee said. "There's been an internal alert. We have to freeze the funds until we clear a fraud indicator. It's standard protocol." "What fraud indicator?" "I followed every rule." The line went silent for a moment. "We are investigating," Ms. Lee said quietly, "but no guarantees." Simone's chest tightened. She closed her laptop and paced around the cramped space. Behind her shelves held binders of legal papers and printed flowcharts. Each page represented months of work. She glanced at her photograph of her parents on the desk. Their warm smiles reminded her of every challenge she had overcome. She reminded herself this was just another obstacle. She took a deep breath and dialed her legal counsel, Mr. Danvers. He answered on the first ring. Simone explained the situation. Mr. Danvers's voice held calm confidence. "I will contact the bank's legal team," he said. "He will demand immediate explanation and release of the funds." By evening, Simone and her small team gathered in the meeting room, a converted closet with a round table and 4 chairs. The air smelled of takeout pizza and coffee. Her lead engineer, Jorge, tapped nervously on his tablet. "If the money is stuck in the bank, our payroll will suffer next week," he said. Another colleague, Priya, added, "We have clients waiting for payments in Mexico and Brazil. Delays will hurt our reputation." Simone stifled frustration. She looked at each of them, her gaze firm. "We will solve this," she said. "I have faith in our partners, and I have faith in the strength of our case." She outlined a plan. Mr. Danvers would push for legal clarity. Simone would call her investors to reassure them. And Jorge and Priya would prepare a backup funding plan with a small bridge loan. That night, Simone could not sleep. She lay in bed with her phone in hand, staring at the ceiling. Her mind replayed every moment since the wire transfer. She thought of the security officer in the lobby, the curious look he gave her. Was it a sign? She pressed her hand against her chest and felt her heart pounding. She thought of her parents again and their sacrifices. She wanted to prove to them and to everyone who doubted her that she belonged at this level. Finally, exhaustion overtook her. She closed her eyes, determined to face the crisis at dawn. The next morning, Simone strode into the bank's Midtown branch. She wore a crisp white shirt and black trousers, her hair pulled back in a smooth bun. She felt the weight of every eye in the lobby as she walked past the tellers. Her legal counsel, Mr. Danvers, met her at the entrance. He looked grave. "They are still investigating," he whispered. "They say there is a discrepancy in the compliance report." Simone glanced at the marble floors glinting under fluorescent lights. She breathed deeply. "Let's go," she said softly, her resolve shining through. They were led to a meeting room behind heavy wooden doors. 4 bank representatives sat around a table designed for negotiations. On one side of the table sat a security officer in plain clothes, arms folded. On the other side sat Simone and Mr. Danvers. The head compliance officer, Ms. Wright, spoke first. Her tone was polite but firm. "Ms. Jackson, we discovered that the source of funds documentation did not meet our updated risk policies." Simone felt a surge of anger. "I provided every document you requested," she said. "Tax returns, investor letters, audited statements, all verified." Ms. Wright showed printed pages. "Your auditor's signature is missing from page 3. Simone stared at the paper. She recognized the auditor's stamp, but then saw the blank signature line. "That must be a printing error," she replied. "My auditor assures me it's been signed." Mr. Danvers leaned forward. "We will resolve this immediately," he said. "I will have the corrected documents in your hands by noon." Officers exchanged looks. "We will review them promptly," Ms. Wright said. "But until then, the funds remain frozen." Simone's throat tightened. She nodded and left the room, her legal counsel by her side. Outside, she closed her eyes and steadied herself. This was a test of patience, she reminded herself, not a defeat. Back at her office, Simone and her team worked through the morning. Jorge scanned the missing signature page and set up a secure call with the auditor. Priya drafted an email to investors, apologizing for the delay and promising transparency. Simone paced around the conference table, her mind calculating every risk. She felt the weight of responsibility. Overnight, social media had caught wind of the freeze. A brief headline on a financial news site read, "Fintech startup's $3 billion deposit hits hurdle." Comments speculated about possible fraud. Simone's chest tightened, but she refused to succumb to fear. She stood by the window, looking at cars flowing down the street like tiny streams of light. She took a steadying breath and returned to her desk. At noon, the corrected documents arrived. Simone signed them quickly and sent them via a secure bank portal. She called Ms. Lee to confirm the upload. A clerk answered, and Simone asked to speak to the operations team. A few minutes later, The same technician who had initiated the transfer appeared on her screen. "Ms. Jackson," he said, "we have everything now. We'll process the deposit today." Simone let out a quiet sigh of relief. "Thank you," she said. "Please let me know once it's complete." He nodded and ended the call. Legs felt weak, so she sat down. She closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of calm before facing the final hurdle, the actual release of the funds. By mid-afternoon, she was back at the bank's operations room. The technician typed once more and watched the process. Simone hovered behind him, her hands clasped. The screen blinked. Reversal canceled, then transfer confirmed. Simone's shoulders relaxed, and she exhaled deeply. The funds were back. $3 billion sat in the account as originally planned. She closed her eyes and imagined every penny flowing out to support small businesses worldwide. She thought of the bakers in Mexico, the artisans in Brazil, the shop owners in South Africa waiting for PH's help. Simone left the bank that evening with a quiet sense of triumph, but also a new awareness. Power always attracted scrutiny. She had navigated a crisis born partly of a simple missing signature, but she also knew that her identity as a black woman CEO had drawn extra attention to every detail. As she drove home under streetlights, she resolved to use this experience to make her company stronger. She would streamline documentation, build closer ties with compliance teams, and share her story with other entrepreneurs so they could prepare for similar challenges. When she pulled into her parking spot, she felt both relief and determination. The crisis had tested her resolve, and she had emerged victorious. Her journey was far from over, but she had proven that no obstacle, no matter how daunting, could stop her forward momentum. Simone woke to the sound of her phone buzzing on the bedside table. It was 6:30 a.m., and the message from her legal counsel, Mr. Danvers, was short and urgent. "Regulators want to meet today." She swung her legs over the side of the bed and took a deep breath. Yesterday's victory felt distant now. The freeze on the $3 billion had been lifted, but new challenges loomed. Today, she would face regulators and answer tough questions about her company PEs. And the massive deposit, she dressed quickly in a light gray blazer and matching pants, choosing comfortable shoes for what might be a long day. In the kitchen, she poured coffee into a travel mug and grabbed a protein bar. Her apartment was quiet. Only the hum of her laptop and the soft chirping of an early bird outside the window disturbed the stillness. She paused for a moment, thinking of her parents. She imagined her mother's gentle voice telling her she could do this, and her father's steady encouragement. That memory gave her strength. By 8 a.m., Simone had arrived at the federal regulator's downtown office. The building was imposing, tall, solid, and made of stone. Security checked her ID, and an assistant led her down a long corridor to a small conference room. Inside, 3 regulators sat behind a polished wood table. They wore serious expressions and folded their hands in front of them. One of them, a woman named Ms. Carter, introduced herself as the lead investigator, spoke in calm, precise tones. "Ms. Jackson, we need to understand the chain of events that led to the deposit reversal. We also want to ensure there was no racial bias in the bank's handling of your account." Simone nodded. She had prepared for this moment, gathering emails, logs, and internal memos. She passed a thick binder to the regulators. It contained the signed agreement, the compliance documents, and a record of her team's communications with the bank. "Everything is here," she said. "I followed all protocols. I want full transparency just as you do." Ms. Carter flipped through pages, her eyes scanning quickly. She paused at an email from Mr. Caldwell, acknowledging receipt of Simone's compliance reports. "This looks in order," Ms. Carter said. "But why did security remove you from the bank on the day of the deposit?" Simone took a steadying breath and recounted the moment 2 plainclothes officers escorted her out, without clear explanation. She described the boardroom celebration, the cheerful cake, and then the sudden hush when security arrived. The regulators exchanged looks. "Was any bank policy cited?" asked the second investigator. "Mr. Nguyen, none," Simone replied. "I asked, but they only said internal review. No policy, no notice." She watched the regulators note each word. After an hour of questions about her company's operations, financial controls, and relationships with investors, Ms. Carter leaned forward. We have reports from other banks that minority entrepreneurs sometimes face harsher scrutiny. We will investigate whether First National Bank applied its protocols differently in your case. Simone felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief that racial bias would be examined. Apprehension at the implications for the bank. She knew that exposing bias could trigger a lengthy legal battle, but she also believed in justice. The meeting ended with regulators promising to keep her informed. Simone left the building feeling a strange calm. She had told her story clearly and provided evidence. Now she needed to manage the fallout at PE's. She called Jorge, her lead engineer, and Priya, her head of client relations, and asked them to meet at her office in an hour. Back at her office, Simone found her small team waiting anxiously. Jorge fiddled with a pen, and Priya tapped her foot. "What did they say?" Jorge asked. Simone explained that regulators would probe both the deposit reversal and possible bias. Priya's eyes widened. "It could take months," she said. "Our investors might panic." Simone nodded. "We need a communications plan. We must be transparent with everyone, investors, clients, and our own staff." She outlined a strategy. Send a clear statement to investors by midday. Hold an all-hands meeting with employees this afternoon. And prepare a press release to reassure clients and the public. Priya and Jorge set to work. Priya drafted a letter to investors, emphasizing that the deposit was secure and that regulators were investigating both the bank's process and potential bias. She highlighted PI's strong performance and the measures taken to protect funds. Jorge updated the company website's security page, adding a section about regulatory oversight and how PIs worked closely with banks to maintain compliance. Simone reviewed both drafts, made edits, and approved them. At noon, Simone sent the investor letter. Within minutes, replies started arriving. Most were supportive. "We believe in you and your mission," wrote one. "Let us know how we can help," wrote another. A few messages were cautious. "Please keep us updated on the regulatory findings," one investor wrote. Simone replied personally to each, thanking them for their trust and assuring them of her commitment to transparency. After lunch, which Simone barely tasted because her phone kept buzzing, she gathered her team for the all-hands meeting. Conference room was modest, but filled with eager faces. Employees sat in chairs around the table, and some stood by the walls. Simone stood at the head holding her travel mug. She spoke honestly. "I know these past days have been stressful. We faced an unexpected freeze of our largest deposit. Investigators are now looking into the cause. I want you to know that the funds are secure and that we are cooperating fully with regulators. We also believe we need to address the possibility of bias in the bank's actions. That will take time, but we will update you every step of the way." She paused to let the words sink in. "Your dedication made this company what it is. I trust in our team, and I know we will overcome this." Challenge 2. Hands went up with questions. One staff member asked about payroll. Simone confirmed that PIs had arranged a short-term credit facility to cover expenses if needed. Another asked about media coverage. Priya answered that they had prepared a press release that would go out immediately after the regulators. Public notice. Simone assured the team that she would hold weekly updates until the situation was resolved. The room relaxed as staff nodded, reassured by her clear plan. That afternoon, Simone watched as Priya published the press release on PIS's website and sent it to select media contacts. The statement explained the circumstances neutrally, praised the bank's cooperation, and reaffirmed PIS's mission to support small businesses globally. Simone felt a twinge of pride. The statement was honest, firm, and hopeful. As evening approached, Simone returned home to find a dozen unread voicemails. One was from Ms. Lee at First National Bank. Simone called her back immediately. "Simone," Ms. Lee said, her voice more gentle than before, "we have completed our internal review. The freeze was triggered by a new automated risk filter. It flagged your deposit as unusual because of its size and origin. It was a technical issue, not a deliberate action. We apologize for the confusion and any distress caused. Simone listened carefully. Will you issue a public statement to that effect? She asked. Ms. Lee hesitated, then agreed to draft one. We will share it with you before it goes out, she said. Simone felt relief mixed with skepticism. Automated filters were part of modern banking. But she also knew that automated systems reflect human choices, how the rules are written, what thresholds trigger alerts. She decided to request a review of the filter's parameters to prevent similar incidents. She thanked Ms. Lee and ended the call. That night, Simone drafted an email to the heads of compliance at major banks, inviting them to discuss how risk filters could be tuned fairly. She believed the incident could spark industry-wide improvements. She imagined roundtable discussions where minority entrepreneurs would share their experiences and help banks design more inclusive systems. It was a big idea, but Simone was never one to think small. As she prepared for bed, Simone reflected on the day's events. She had faced regulators, managed communications, and pushed the bank to correct its mistake. The crisis had tested her leadership, but it had also shown her the power of honesty and persistence. She pressed her hand to her heart and thought of her parents again. She whispered, "We did it." Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph. PES was more than a payment app. It was a story of resilience, integrity, and change. And Simone Jackson stood at its helm, ready for whatever came next. Simone woke to the gentle hum of her phone's alarm. The morning light spilled through her bedroom window in soft beams. She reached over and read the message from Ms. Carter at the regulator's office. Review completed. Meeting at 10 a.m., Simone sat up and drew in a deep breath. This was the day everything would come into focus. She dressed in a smart blouse and skirt, choosing deep blue to reflect calm strength. As she packed her bag, she thought of the long journey from her old apartment, coating by candlelight, to this moment of reckoning. At 10, Simone walked into the regulator's downtown office for the final meeting. The same 3 investigators greeted her, their faces serious, but not unkind. Ms. Carter began by summarizing the findings. Our inquiry found no evidence of intentional racial bias. The bank's automated filter simply misclassified the deposit. Due to a combination of factors, Simone nodded, relief washing through her. She had feared the process might drag on, or that deeper prejudice might surface. Instead, it seemed a technical glitch had caused the trouble. Ms. Carter continued. However, we did find that the bank's communication fell short. You should not have been let out of the building without clear explanation. First National Bank will issue a formal apology and restructure their alert protocols. Simone listened closely, her heart pounding with hope. She had demanded accountability, not just for herself, but for every entrepreneur who might face similar hurdles. The regulators confirmed they would oversee the implementation of new guidelines at the bank and share them with other major institutions. Leaving the regulator's office, Simone felt a mix of triumph and humility. External validation was important, but she knew real change would come through action. She called Priya and Jorge and asked them to meet her at Pay's headquarters. In the conference room, the 3 of them reviewed the regulator's report. Jorge tapped his pen against the table. This is good news, but we need to prepare for the bank's apology and next steps. Priya nodded. We should draft a public statement and plan an announcement that highlights our partnership with the bank and our shared goal. Simone agreed. She placed the thick report on the table. We want to show the world this was a moment of learning and growth, she said. They drafted a statement together. It thanked the regulators for their thorough review, thanked First National Bank for their apology and cooperation, and reaffirmed Pize's commitment to serve small businesses everywhere. They highlighted the $3 billion fund, now fully in place and ready to support merchants around the world. A few hours later, Simone sat in the bank's boardroom again, but this time under very different circumstances. Around her were Ms. Lee, Mr. Caldwell, and several senior executives. On the table lay 2 documents, the apology letter and an updated protocol agreement. Simone watched as Mr. Caldwell read the apology. Dead said, "We regret the distress caused by our internal review process. We commit to clearer communication and updated risk filters to prevent similar situations. He looked up and met Simone's eyes. On behalf of First National Bank, I offer our sincere apologies. Simone accepted the letter, her fingers brushing the embossed paper. Thank you, she replied softly. I appreciate your willingness to change. Next came the protocol agreement. It detailed new steps. Any large deposit flagged by an automated filter would prompt an immediate, clear notification to the account holder explaining the reason and estimated time to resolution. There would also be a human review team available 24/7 to handle urgent cases. Both bank and PEs signed the agreement. Simone felt a surge of pride. This was not just a fix for her company. It was a model that could help many other entrepreneurs navigate complex banking systems. Back at PEs, news of the agreement and bank apologies spread quickly. Social media lit up with stories about the partnership and the role of regulators in driving change. Local newspapers ran articles on the front page praising Simone's leadership and the bank's swift actions. One headline read, "Fintech. CEO turns crisis into opportunity." In company emails and on Slack channels, employees celebrated. Simone sent a note to her entire staff. Today we prove that persistence and clear principles can reshape industries. Thank you for standing by me and working so hard. That evening, Simone called her parents. On speakerphone, her mother's face filled the screen, and Simone shared the day's events. Her father tipped the phone so he could see her. Cheered and cried at the same time. Her mother said, "You have made history, Simone. We knew you could do it." Her father added, "You have opened a door for so many others." Simone felt a lump in her throat. Everything she had endured, the long hours, the stress, the doubts led to this moment. She thanked them for their constant support. Over the next weeks, Simone turned her attention to her broader vision. She had long planned to launch a foundation to help minority entrepreneurs learn financial and technical skills. With the bank's backing and the recent spotlight on fair banking practices, now was the perfect time. She gathered her team and began writing the charter for the PI's foundation. It would provide workshops on compliance, coding boot camps, and mentorship programs. Simone imagined entrepreneurs in small towns, in communities where banking services were complicated and often unfriendly. She reached out to other fintech leaders and secured commitments for guest speakers. She partnered with community colleges to host scholarships. She even met with local chambers of commerce to ensure the foundation's programs reached Christian stores in rural America, Black-owned shops in urban centers, and artisans in underserved neighborhoods. The foundation's goal was simple: give entrepreneurs the knowledge and confidence to navigate the financial world. Simone believed that with the right tools, anyone could turn their small idea into a global success. One evening, several months later, Simone stood at a podium in a packed auditorium. It was the launch event for the PE's foundation. The room was filled with hopeful faces, young and old, men and women from diverse backgrounds. Simone spoke without notes. She told her story, the early days of coding, the first merchant, the shock of losing and then regaining $3 billion, and the lessons learned from every step. She described how perseverance, clarity, and a willingness to demand fairness had not only saved her own company, but could help countless others. As she finished, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Simone felt tears in her eyes. This was more than a speech. It was a promise fulfilled. Later, people came up to her to thank her. An owner of a small bakery said, "Your story gave me hope that I can grow too." A young woman entrepreneur said, "I felt invisible before, but now I know banks can listen." Simone realized that her journey had touched lives beyond her imagination. That night, as she walked home under the city lights, Simone reflected on how far she had come. The crisis at the bank had seemed like the end of everything, but it became the start of something greater. She pressed her hand to her heart and whispered, "This is only the beginning." In her mind, she saw the faces of the entrepreneurs who would build their dreams with the foundation's help. She saw the changes in banking policies around the world. She saw a future where talent and hard work mattered more than background or skin color. Simone unlocked her apartment door and stepped inside. She paused in the entryway and looked around her small living room. It was modest, but filled with memories, photos of her parents, awards on the shelf, postcards from clients overseas. She smiled and walked to her desk, where her laptop waited. She opened a new document and began to write an email inviting more partners for the foundation. Her journey was far from over. Little by little, she would change the world of finance and maybe the world itself. With each word she typed, Simone knew that her story, and the story of every person she inspired, would continue to grow.